We are having our study session for the Lake Mountain School District Board of Education. We're really excited about the items we have in our study session this evening. So first up, we're going to have a presentation by Aaron Hale, who's going to talk to us about dual language immersion, Advanced Learning Lab, which is the Gifted and Talented program, and Title I. So Aaron, are you okay if you just come to the mic right here? Thank you.
Is this better? Oh, there we go. How many of you water ski? There we go. Any underwater snorkelers or deep sea divers? A little bit. So this prompt to really think about what do we need to do to be ready for day one for our ALL/gifted services and DLI programs is a great prompt. And so this might feel a little bit like water skiing. But there are some additional materials that will help you go a little bit deeper. And if there's more information that we can provide about all the background pieces, we're happy to provide that as a team. So with that, we've got a couple of things that I want you to be aware of as we're thinking across the surface. What do we need to have prepared in the fall of 2027? So the lay of the land is this. In that far column, you'll see the context of our dual language immersion participants. So you have 2 languages offered here in the Lake Mountain School District with Chinese immersion and Spanish immersion. You have a total of about 1,719, maybe 20, because we just added one. And with that, the number of students who are just Lake Mountain is important to consider, because we do have some students transferring from what will no longer be Lake Mountain. So that's a consideration just to think about. We have Riverview and Harvest, Black Ridge, all in a row. Those elementary schools have been in existence for a while with a brand new immersion program out at Eagle Mountain with the Mountain Trails Spanish immersion program, and they'll be in year 2 next year. And so with that, we're very thankful for great teachers and supportive communities that show up by voting with their feet. We do a lottery every year, and you'll see high numbers across the board of those interested, and we don't have enough capacity to fill the interest. We had a lottery in December for our incoming first grade classes this year. Any guesses on how many applied for Harvest?
Oh, it's a lot.
A lot is a good answer. So there's 64 seats. That a lot equated to 199. And they had to turn away 17 of their own students and are only able to fill those seats with Harvest students. Riverview, any guesses there? It's lower, but 64 seats and 100 applied, and about that many for Black Ridge as well. Please, yeah.
Or creating more classrooms in the future? Is that ever something that we've discussed or can be discussed? Because that's an amazing amount of kids. I'd hate to, more than half you have to turn down.
I totally agree, and think that's something when you're thinking deep about this, or deeply about this, that's definitely a consideration in the future. In 2024, we made the recommendation to open up Mountain Trails to try and accommodate the additional interest, and also at River Rock, which is in Lehigh. So we were able to fill all of those seats as well, and it just keeps on amazing us like how much interest there is in the program. across the surface, there's these categories to keep in mind for day one. For enrollment, we do our lottery in December and January, and assuming that Lake Mountain will continue moving forward with the program as is, we'll be having families apply in that time frame. We also are obligated to tell the state about how many sections of Bridge we have. So the Bridge program is our high school program. It's a 3,000 level course, and that's at Westlake and at Cedar Valley. We've got Chinese immersion and Spanish immersion at Westlake and Chinese immersion at the Cedar Valley High School. And so it's important for us just to know the support so that we're ready to tell the state, yes, we're moving forward with that. It's a partnership with the universities. So with that, students are afforded college credit, and we continue to see a lot of growth and interest across the board where our Chinese immersion numbers continue to grow. Our Spanish immersion programs are growing even faster. So we're able to bring in our multilingual students who may have not had dual language immersion in elementary and reach an opportunity to show their proficiency and enter the program at that time. So in that, we need to know, again, that time frame is good to go. We have the seal of biliteracy. That also is an important consideration at the beginning of the district. In the category of staffing and teacher admin capacity, we've got a new hire at Mountain Trails. So next year will be second grade, and then it'll go on to third grade. So just to be ready for expanding that program and supporting transition of international teachers. So you have 9 teachers who are on visas and progressing through that process. The expense is almost done as far as the district's obligation, but just the nuance of transitioning into a new entity, that's something to be aware of that we're helping those folks with. And then we have likewise certification with AP training. There's some new AP requirements, so that's something that we're thinking of behind the scenes and prepping our teachers with professional development and making sure that they're all set with that. I would encourage us to think about the role of world languages in DLI, so that WL is world language. And we have such a great example of oversight with our administration teams and coaches with world language, ML, multilingual, and DLI all in one umbrella. For whatever reason, at the district level, right now, that's kind of separate. And so moving into this area, I think that's an important consideration. What is that world language support going to look like so that we can really fold our efforts into one and making that a concerted effort versus it being maybe a parallel universe. We've got program evaluation. Senate Bill 201 is something that we may be asked to do in that first year, which is an evaluation of the program, making sure that we're doing right and following the assurances that we told families who signed up for the program that we were going to do. So that's yet to be determined, but that's something that we are aware of as a possibility. We're rolling out the science adoption next year and working on translations for all languages. And so to have that ready in Chinese and Spanish, those materials will be ready. And there may be a new directive from the state regarding our curriculum adoption or a more formal adoption for our literacy and math programs as well. So that's, again, water skiing, just to be aware of those kinds of topics. And then the last thing is funding. Hot off the press, last week, there was new funding structure announced by the state. And so we'll be asked to apply. DLI funding is not going away, it's just being restructured. We have a couple of coaching changes where USBE has supported us with 2 coaches, and that structure is sunsetting. And so we'll have a new process of applying for DLI funds, and what that amount is yet to be determined, but we anticipate that it'll be known soon. So just going a little bit deeper on enrollment, I mentioned a couple of things just to be aware of. We talked about this with the 199.
Aaron, can I pause you for a second?
You
Sorry,
bet.
I don't mean to interrupt.
Yep.
before we go too much further, the USBA grant application, is that going to be based on, you think, like number of students enrolled, number of languages? I'm just curious because, I think we have a higher expense generally with the Mandarin program than we do with the Spanish program, just because it's harder to find the materials and the supports and things.
Right.
So is that based on program enrollment numbers? Do you know what that's going to be based on yet?
They're still working out the details, and so I'm as anxious as you to find out the information. But it seems like the intent is to put more dollars into the district's hands so that they can accommodate the needs of their individual communities. So stay tuned for that, and then we'll make sure and adapt. The policy and practice of out of district I mentioned. Just thinking about the implications there, I can get you more information about how many students are we talking about. So with Riverview so close to Lehigh, we have several families who are transferring into Riverview, but technically would be in Aspen Peak School District. And so being prepared to think about how we allow students to transfer in to participate in that is something that's going to have an impact in this coming fall's lottery.
Do you anticipate that needs to be something that we actually write in policy, or that we just basically send letters to parents saying, if your student is involved and enrolled in a DLI program or an ALL program in this area, we would consider you grandfathered in, and that you would be considered like in boundary student, you would be treated as such, you wouldn't have to apply for out of boundary? Is it something like that we would do?
That would be an assurance that I think a lot of families would then have confidence that they could move forward with applying through the lottery. And some of that is also happening at the secondary level, where their children went to Harvest or went Riverview, and now they're hoping to go to Vista Heights for those immersion programs. Where we have Chinese and Spanish immersion offerings in Aspen Peaks, it still may be the difference of a 5-minute drive to
Alpine. Yeah, Alpine's a lot further.
Right.
So would you anticipate that this is something that we would do as an MOU with the other districts, or that we could just send the letter and say, yeah, like, you're welcome to be here? You're like, okay, we're going to
Yes.
let Vicki about that awkwardly.
Yes.
Okay, so it's something we probably need to address with the other districts.
That's the
is what I'm
deep
hearing.
dive piece that I would
Okay.
lean on the experts to think about, but just that's the idea, and have that on your radar. So in addition to that, making sure that we have high school bridge forecasting. We talked about that same time frame where we commit to the state that we're going to have X number of sections of the high school program. And so with the growth of the Spanish immersion program at Westlake in particular, we just want to have that assurance that we can say we're having this program moving forward to the level that we've had it. You bet.
I've heard from families that have done the DLA programs that they've struggled with, if they have like younger siblings, and being able to guarantee that the younger sibling can get in the kindergarten for this program at that school and then be able to continue kind of like because if they're not there, it becomes difficult. And I know people that have been worried they're going to have kids into elementary schools and they do want to continue to that DLI program.
Right.
Is that something we consider bringing back? Again, that's also going to affect enrollment numbers. But I know that's one thing that I believe Alpine originally allowed, and then it's kind of went away.
So the ripple effect of that is something for the board to consider, right? If you think about the number of siblings who would then also have a seat, that has a ripple effect on the FTE that the boards would need to consider, right? So each board is considering what the implications of that are. It has turned some families away because of the challenge of having to travel to multiple sites, right? So I think the intent of honoring families staying together is awesome, and principals do a good job of filling those seats or giving those seats to families if they can. But sometimes that's not until a week or two before school, right?
School side, the planning perspective of being able to like have those FTE and those numbers figured out before, 2 weeks before school starts could be helpful too. So
For sure.
looking at all angles of that. So appreciate.
Yep, there are definitely two sides to the coin, or in this theme, two sides to the fin. Do we say that? Okay. Anyway.
Silver dollars are
Silver dollars.
got in the ski.
Exactly. We're going to go to gifted services next. And ALL is the Alpine language, right? So we have 3 sites in elementary here. In your packet, you have a couple of handouts that are specific to go a little bit deeper into the AL data. With Hidden Hollow and Silver Lake in Eagle Mountain, we're excited that we were able to open up a new site that came out of a 2024 study, so we really appreciate that. And there are students who are not yet accessing the program just because of location, right? So kind of back to your question about seats for DLI, I think ALL, as we grow into things as a district, may be a good area to study. With the sites, all of them now have 3rd grade, where before that wasn't uniform, and that's had a good impact on participation. In the West schools in this area, we haven't seen the same challenges that we may have seen in the Central or the South schools, where there are FTE ripple effects because they can't fill the seats with their own populations. And so sometimes they've created hybrid classes or other things, and we don't have that experience here because there are so many students to kind of draw upon. So that's good news. The 3 areas that I want you to consider from both the water skiing and the deep dive perspective is to know that we test generally in October through November, and that helps to inform families of the seats, helps schools to prepare for them, and confirming the model moving forward is what we're going to do is helpful to know so that we can maintain that same kind of identification process. Identification is not spelled out by the state. It doesn't say exactly how we need to do that, but it does say that we need to have a process, and we have to do more than use just one assessment, which is state assessment. So we've used the COGAT. If we move forward as is, then our district wouldn't have to go through a whole process of adopting an assessment or an identification process. So I would encourage kind of status quo, and in the handout, it has kind of 2 options there. So, yes.
So if we use the current process, do we need to formally adopt that we're going to use the current process, or does it just kind of sunshine over?
It used to be that the COGAT was the only assessment of its kind, and now there are 2. So in that first year, we will need to go through an adoption process, but this will get us through going into 2027.
So we don't need to adopt prior to October for the 27 testing window?
We would need to start looking at things and go through the RFP to be able to officially use that. So that's also part of the identification deep dive. Thank you for that. The other piece to consider right now is we have a 2-year cohort to earn your endorsement in that area of gifted services. And so we have a cohort right now that could finish next year, but we couldn't start a new one next year unless we had a commitment that we would continue with that. Does that make sense? And all of this is funded through a state grant, and we would need to apply for the grant. The timing of that grant is variable. This year it was in the spring, but just know that that's something that we would be working on. And in the future slides, it has kind of a comparison of about how much like districts receive as far as that grant goes. It has paid for our director and assessments, stipends for teachers, representative for each school to have that gifted services hat, so to speak. So we'll go ahead and go through the rest of those slides. You can do a deeper dive into that information if that's helpful. We'll keep going. Thank you. So on that endorsement piece, you can see a little bit more information to even consider a consortium kind of style, and that's something that we can decide in the coming year, hopefully, whether you would approve of that kind of model where we could have cohorts starting next year because they know that it's going to continue into the next year. So those are the three areas for ALL, again, to consider: the funding, the identification, and then the endorsement piece, okay? So that's been 20 minutes. Water skiing, hopefully has been not too quick, but if there are other pieces that are really helpful as you think of those subtopics, we're happy to provide more information.
That was awesome, Aaron.
I
Just
appreciate
like you shoved a lot of information, and now we all have homework that we have to go home and like read and deep dive into. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming and giving us homework.
You bet. You could even do that in your hot tub or your bathtub with the thoughts, right?
Wow. Okay.
Just to keep with the water theme.
Yeah, I get that you're trying to stick with a theme.
Okay.
Good job.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay, next up, we're gonna hear from Jason Croton, who's gonna talk to us about data at the elementary level.
Okay. We ready? Thank you. I don't have a theme, so thanks a lot, Aaron.
Those of us that have water phobia are excited. There's no theme.
There's no theme here. Okay. I appreciate the topic. I was asked to talk about what information and data do we gather at the elementary level, and how do we use that data. And at first glance, I was like, oh, this is really easy. And then I was like, oh, thank you, Julie, for making this very complicated, because my mind went everywhere. So we'll try to give you kind of a broad overview of the data we collect and how we use it. We are currently in testing season, and so we'll have some data here shortly in the next few weeks to see how we're doing. Okay, let's talk about what's available. We did a book study last couple of years. This book called Data Everywhere. It seems like we have data, too much data now with technology and AI. And it talks about the different types of data that we can collect. So if you look at that data, which one do we usually look at the most? Probably that green student learning box, right? We look at assessment data. We do look at demographic data for enrollment, boundaries, class size, and how many students do we have that are multilingual? How many have IEPs? So then we can determine supports that we need in the schools. We also have perception data. So we have surveys that we take. We have district surveys, and there are school surveys that happen that we can use that data as well. And something we don't talk about a lot is process data, because that's qualitative, and it's like, how are we doing? Like, what are we doing to impact the data that we get? So let's look at some of the data. That's in your handout. We have a lot of different data sources, and that's not the whole list. I couldn't fit it all on the slide. So I started to just put some of the data that comes to mind when we talk about elementary data. How many assessments do we take in elementary that are required? Okay, RISE, Acadience, math and reading, WIDA. DLI, kindergarten assessment, preschool, there's a whole bunch of assessments. And some of you may be hearing those for the first time, wondering, like, what are those types of assessments? And so let's look at them. Okay, so Acadian's reading and Acadian's math. So let's look at that real quick. We take that 3 times per year in grades K through 6 for reading, and then K through 3 for math. It is state required that we take that assessment. That assessment's nice because it's 3 times per year, so we have like a check-in in the middle, and then at the end of the year, we can see how we're doing. Our WIDA assessment, that's for our multilingual students, to see, are we supporting our students with English proficiency? They come to our school, and then we screen them to see what do they come in with, and then we determine, okay, are we making an impact for them so they are proficient in English and their native language? And that's where the seal of biliteracy comes in, that Aaron talked about, where students get that award. RISE, you've probably heard about. RISE testing's happening right now, grades 3 through 6, and ELA, math, science, and then writing. So, and then we have our STAMP data. So it used to be called Apple, and that's our DLI test. It's our language test to see, like, how are we doing with those programs with our DLI immersion classes. That data is in October. So if you're noticing, like, a lot of these are like one time. And so then you're like wondering, like, how do we make an impact when we're looking at data that's summative? And what should we be doing, like, in between? There's other data that we have, so let's look at that. Progress monitoring. What is that tied to? Eileen's nodding her head because she knows.
Well, it's tied to how we teach all along, but our teachers do it along the way so that we know, it's Acadian.
Yep, Acadians. Acadians reading and math. No, you're great. But you're right, we do it along the way to check. Right now, in our district, we've administered like 600,000 different progress monitors. And if you think about, and those are one-on-one progress monitors with our students, where we're checking along the way. RISE benchmarks. There are benchmark assessments that we give to check along the way. And then there's also district benchmarks that people can use. These are all optional that people can use, okay? Let's look at, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
What is the requirement, state, federal, district, like all of the above? Like,
Yeah.
why? Because some of those also for specific groups as well. So, because not everyone takes the WIDA, it's in,
Right,
so are those, so all those are required by one of those things, or?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. And parents can choose to have their students take those tests as well. And
Yep.
so there's legislation where they can opt out their student of testing and they can be given an alternative, assessment.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then we're looking at, there's team assessments, common formative assessments that teams make. And we have curriculum type of assessments. So we have Wonders for language arts and Ready Math that we use as well. And then teachers use that curriculum throughout the year. Okay. And you're probably thinking that's a lot of assessments. And if you think about all the classroom assessments that there are too many assessments, right? There are. If you list them all out, a student cannot take them all. The philosophy of assessment is we should be able to have a balanced form of assessment. Assessment is not just a test or a quiz that you sit down and take. It can be an observation. It can be students with whiteboards and you're just observing. We should have a balanced form of assessment, and students hopefully can transfer the knowledge between the different types of assessments that they get. And so I'm a proponent of just using the right thing at the right time. Yes.
Important to know. I'm not touching it. I think it's also important to note, assessments are so important for the student. The student is able to see how they are developing and if they're keeping up and that sort of thing. It's not just for us, it's for the student also.
Yeah, thank you. And that goes along with collective efficacy for our teachers. That is the most powerful way to make progress, and it's looking at data. And feedback for students and teachers and parents is also has a very high effect size of what makes a difference. If a student's getting feedback regularly and they're like, oh, that's what I did wrong, then they can improve. And so that the most powerful assessment's formative. It's the stuff that teachers are doing in the classroom. Let's look at some perception data that we collect. So we have a survey that's called the Culture, Climate, and Connection Survey, where students are asked about their experience at school. Like, do they feel safe? Do they feel safe to share in class? Talks about behavior and emotional well-being. That survey is an opt-in survey where parents can opt their student in to take it. That's in grades 3 through 6. So in grades K through 2, schools will sometimes do like a basic survey with our lower grade students, like, how are you feeling? And they'll have like a smiley face or something, and then that's what they choose. We want to know how our students are doing, how they feel about their learning, and how they feel about their teacher and their experience and their friends, and if they're having a good experience at school. We have stakeholder surveys that we give. Some of those are state directed, where we have a state survey for our stakeholders, and that's for parents and staff members, teachers, students, where we get feedback, and the state gives us that survey. That's also opt-in, so people can opt in to all of these type of surveys. Other type of data we get is from professional development. We have professional development for our teachers, and we survey, like, what do you need? Like, how are things going? How can we help you in the classroom? There's a lot of data. So the question is, like, how do we use this? Because we get a lot. Yes, go ahead.
So can I interject? There's also surveys we can choose to administer or not, like, for example, the SHARP.
Yes.
Right? Like, every district basically can choose whether or not they're accessing that. So at some point, we're going to have to decide which ones we also choose
Yes.
to offer, because there are additional ones that maybe are not on here that we could choose to
Yes.
include or not.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the same with, like, the Culture Climate Connection Survey. We could choose and say, you know what, like, do we want to continue this survey?
Connection one, is that something that we've created in-house, or do we outsource the survey collection or how it's done?
It's a good
But I know
question.
the term.
It was a little bit of both. So our Student Services Department partnered with the BYU
Okay.
and with a psychometrician to be able to develop a survey that was valid and reliable, and it's property of the district.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. The power of data is combining data and asking questions. It's not looking at, well, how are we doing? It's, how are we doing connected with our student groups? How are we doing with, how are students feeling about their learning? How are teachers feeling? And then you start to combine the data sets. And that's what that we do for the district and for schools, is we start to ask questions. For example, does attendance affect some of our reading scores? And so we'll dig into that, right? And you're probably thinking, well, yes, it probably does, but we want to identify the students that that's affecting, because then we can drill down to those students and help them, right? This is not an exhaustive list, but here's a list of things that the data is used for. So at a district level, we make goals. We have priorities. Schools make goals on the data. And then that's where we can use action and say, okay, we have resources, we have funding. How can we help teachers in the classroom? How can we help our students? Because that's the most important part of what we're doing. So let's look at an example. I want you to look at that data and maybe talk through that with me. What do you see there? So this Acadian's reading data, second grade. What do you see? What do you notice? And if you're not familiar, we can talk through what that data is.
So, I mean, obviously, the piece that jumps out is there's been almost, there's been a decline in reading scores. Part of that is because obviously, like, the test is not the same, right? Like, the test, I think sometimes there's a perception that, like, end of year, beginning of year, middle of year, that it's the same test, and it's not. The test shifts because the assumption is the skills that you need to have in fall, like those skills grow so
Right.
that by middle of the year, end of the year, the test gets progressively harder because you're supposed to be acquiring more skills.
Yeah, cut scores get higher
Yeah.
because they're supposed to be increasing, right? It's not the same cuts. Okay, what else do you notice? Anything else? Or questions? What questions do you have about that data, Julian?
Tracking ahead of last year.
Okay, so that's good, right? We're tracking ahead. What else?
Your mid-year drop is lower
Okay,
this year as well.
mid-year drop, yeah.
Second grade, so you're not looking at the same group of students. Am I correct on that?
This is second grade beginning to end, and it's
Okay, I was wondering
and
for
then-
2 years, because sometimes you're comparing
Yeah.
not the same. Okay,
and then we're looking at this group beginning to end, yeah.
okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, there's a growth score there. Okay, you see that growth percentage? The spring growth, what should be like the norm data nationally, should be around 60%. Okay, so looking at that, it's a little bit low. This year, we're at 54 in the middle of year growth, and we're waiting for results for this end of year to see where we'll be. And this is Lake Mountain Schools data, yes.
The 2025 into a sentence that might be reported, something to the effect of 52% of our students are reading at grade level, which also means 48% are not reading at grade level. Can you put it into a sentence for us? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Okay, so let's look at the spring box where it says 65%. That means that 65% of our students scored above or at benchmark on the literacy screener, okay? We have students that are below and well below. I do not like the term that sometimes comes across in public and in the state messaging that says, well, 65% of the students can read and 35% cannot, because they all have skills. Even our students that are well below benchmark have skills. The test assesses fluency and how fast you can read, because if you're fluent, then you can comprehend, and that just helps with everything, that automaticity. We have students that are reading and they're just not quite there yet. So I look at it as we have students that aren't quite there yet, but they have skills. That helps that, yes. Okay.
I feel like you were a little bit setting me up to give a soliloquy about the Mississippi Miracle garbage, and I'm going to refrain from doing that. But I think one of the things to mention, too, is that we have... I know you guys are entertained. I know that part of it, too, is that there's no nationally normed cut score. So the cut scores that we use are not the same as the cut scores that, for example, Mississippi is using. And so if you try to compare our data state to state, because we're not looking at a normed, like we're not all using the same definition of what proficiency is, it's really not an apples to apples comparison when you look at state testing data, because we use different cut scores to determine what proficiency.
Yes, I would just tweak that a little. So we use different cut scores for reading on grade level. The proficiency cuts are the same nationally, but yes, reading on grade level is different. So our state is going through a process of determining like what the cut should be. This is students that are at or above proficient on the test. So the question is, when we look at that data and we think about all the other data we have, how do you use this at a district level and then at a school grade level and teacher level to help our students? So let's look at it.
Real quick,
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention too that across states, we use different screeners as well. And even within the state, we use different screeners. Like third grade takes Acadians and they take RISE, and they'll have different proficiencies.
Now think about that data that we just looked at. We just looked at student learning data. We should be asking the question with the other quadrants. How are our subgroups doing? What about, how are students feeling about their learning? Do they feel like that they are empowered and they're tracking goals and stuff like that? What about our processes? Everyone wants good data, right? Every school has a goal to increase. But where does the action come in? And that's the process. So I just grabbed some questions that would come up because data should bring questions to what we're doing, right? We should be able to ask questions about the data. And so here's some questions that I just put together. What's the goal? Like, what trends do we see? How are other schools doing? Can we learn from others? And then that trickles down to school and that teacher level. So when you ask all those questions, what schools do and what the district does is we say, what resources do we have and how can we make an impact for students? And there's a huge list just for Acadians reading. A couple I'll highlight. Change management on that district, on that third row. All elementary teachers are required to have the specific components of literacy in their day with specific timing to make sure that our students that are learning those basic skills in K through 3 are getting time, enough time to learn. That PD has gone to schools, administrators, teachers, so they can put that timing in, okay? So then we ask, like, what training do we need? What professional development do we need? And then schools look at their processes and start to go down. And so that's why at the beginning I said, well, Julie gave me this easy topic, but then I was like, whoa, wait a second. It goes everywhere once you, like, if you want to make an impact, it's not about the goal, it's about the process. If we have good processes, our data will be better and will increase. I put some stuff in that we have done. We did professional learning with every teacher. And part of that was goal setting and how you make goals. How do you make SMART goals? How do you make weekly goals for students? Because you can't, it's hard to make a goal on a summative measure, but the weekly, daily things is what makes the difference. Okay. To finish up, some takeaways. With data. We'll have all of our data here in the next couple weeks because testing is, we're in the middle of testing. We need to use multiple data sources for any decision that we make. And I think that schools are doing that and learning how to do that and can ask questions and combine data. We need to disaggregate it by subgroups. It's important to know how are our SPED students doing, how are our multilingual students doing, low-income students, how are they doing? The third one, I put something in parentheses, common assessments. You cannot learn from other schools and get better unless we're doing things that are similar. Okay, we do that with Acadians and RISE, but there may be some common team assessments that maybe every 6th grade teacher takes the same math assessment during the year and we just check in to see how they're doing towards that transfer of knowledge. And then when they take the RISE test, hopefully it transfers over. But if every team's doing different things all the time, it's very hard to learn from another school. Okay. Turning data into action, continuous improvement. We monitor, adjust, repeat, and we constantly do that. Build systems and we support our teachers. And that's what I appreciate about Lake Mountain. I've seen where it says we want to push resources to classrooms, to students, and I appreciate that because that is what makes the difference, is that our teachers feel supported and our students are supported. So, and that's all I have. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Yeah.
Do we pay for a program that, or license a program that manages all this data? The data warehouse or some kind of database management?
Yeah. So our developers, we have a data warehouse, we use SQL Server, and then we use Power BI, and that's what we're building dashboards in right now.
So a combination of,
Yeah, it's a combination, a combo of things to create, the data, yeah.
do you anticipate any changes needed in the contracts for those services?
Those ones are pretty basic contracts. We did have a data dashboard tool that we contracted, and that contract has expired, and we are moving towards kind of internal data reports. It is easier, we know what we want, and it's very difficult to tell a third party or a company, say, well, we want this, this, and this, and it gets very,
You have more in-house flexibility.
it gets very pricey. We can create reports in hours versus like weeks with someone else.
So does your team have access to developers within the team to write your own queries and management
Yep.
on software?
Yep.
Or do you cross-collaborate?
We do both, and so like our team, we write SQL and do all those queries, but we also collaborate with developers for the more complex stuff and the automation.
And those are in-house developers as well?
Yep. Mhm. Yeah.
Another question was the transition between elementary data and secondary data. I understand can be a little rough.
Yes. I don't.
Uncle Beehive. Do you anticipate suggesting any changes in how we collect some of the data there and transition
For like secondary.
between 6 and 7?
Yeah. And that, I think we're going to cover some of that in our next study session. But yes, we have ideas, and we're starting to do more to connect and giving like a junior high, a 7th grade, hey, these are your students coming in.
Yeah.
So these are students that are struggling with reading. Maybe they need that Read 180 class or, stuff like that.
I look forward to that. When is that?
It's next month,
I knew that.
May 14th.
Well, good. Okay.
I have a couple questions, kind
Yeah.
of related to the standardized testing. I know there's somewhat of a movement to opt out for parents, either stress load or whatever. And I know parents can choose that. I've also seen how that can sometimes affect our data differently when certain populations decide not to take the test. Does that affect us, or what have you seen? Is that something to be concerned about? Kind of know what I'm
good
lines
question.
on, because I've seen places where like you opt out, but then you don't have funding because you're whatever, that kind of piece.
So parents can opt out of testing. Our opt-out rates for elementary are around like 2%, 1%, like they're super low. That increases, and we can talk about that with secondary. It increases when you get into secondary. Like, just full transparency, once you get to high school, like there's a lot of kids that opt out, or they're like, well, click, I'm done. And so that's, culture, there's a lot of things that I think we can do to mitigate that.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious because I know I've seen areas where they really try to stress, like, yes, you can opt out, but we see how the classes are performing or whatever. So I'm
Oh.
kind of curious what, like to take. I mean, I do believe that every parent and student can make those choices on their own,
Right.
but also it'd be nice to kind of know what we're looking for and, what that would look like. So
Yeah,
just
we saw
discussion.
opt-outs kind of increase, and so we've been very proactive in the last couple of years where schools are like, just publicizing, this is what we use the data for. And like, this helps me, it helps you, and so we can look at some of those things.
Thank you.
What does the provision of data look like back to the educators, whether that's principals, team leads, teachers in particular?
Good question. So we have platforms that have most of the data that teachers can go in and look clear down to the student. Our team creates a ton of reports for schools, teachers, down to the student level. And that's something that will continue and increase. And we can show you some of those too.
Yeah, and what's your feedback mechanism from the people consuming the data on, say, usability and report effectiveness, that kind of thing?
We have an open channel of communication with our coaches. We have a thread that is constantly going there, like, what about this? What about this? And we are constantly just live helping schools.
Yeah.
So
I imagine some of those reports are created organically from that feedback.
yes. Yeah, and then some of them are custom that, like maybe
Fair
the
question.
board asked for, the district asked for, and then their schools.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thanks, Jason. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay, next up on the agenda, Evan Barrett from Eagle Mountain is going to talk to us about QTS and RDA. Abby, are you joining him or you just here for support? Okay. I didn't want to not recognize you. Like, you know, we're glad that you're here as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. As was mentioned, I'm Evan Barrett. I'm with Mountain City, and Ivory is with us as well. Just going to be going over our RDA, our redevelopment agency, and a coming CRA, a community reinvestment area. I'll kind of give you a little bit of background on what that means and make sure you understand where we're going with this, and kind of give you a heads up on some of the talks that we're going through on that, so that you know as decisions come down the road, you're well informed about that. So I want to give you a little bit of background on RDAs and CRAs, just making sure that we're on the same page. Eagle Mountain City has an RDA, which is a redevelopment agency, and that redevelopment agency is what manages CRAs, or community reinvestment areas. And so there can be several CRAs within a redevelopment agency's territory. Usually they're set up to accomplish a number of purposes, but one of those primary purposes is to help manage a financial tool known as TIF that you're probably familiar with, a tax increment financing arrangement, which usually, as it's constructed, is meant to take the newly generated tax increment or new tax generation that's coming from that project and put it to use in some way. We use these things because it helps, the RDA itself helps to organize the efforts of each of the taxing entities over an area. Within Eagle Mountain City, there's the school district, there's the city, there's the county, there's the water district, and we have a fire district as well. And so each of those can be, they don't have to be, but they usually are participants in these CRAs, and it can be a bit of a wild mess to try and manage that if everyone is trying to handle that separately. So RDA helps to bring those together. These RDAs and the CRAs help to bring these projects to reality. So this is usually what we're talking about is not your typical, everyday business. We're talking about usually the very large businesses who go through a competitive process and a site selection where they're looking for where's the next best place that we're going to build our factory, we're going to build our data center, we're going to build whatever it might be, usually bringing a whole lot of capital. So they're investing millions and millions of dollars, sometimes in the billions of dollars, to build new facilities, put in equipment in there, and operate for the long term. That competitive process can span across Utah, but it can expand. It could span also the whole country, and it can even span the world. And so oftentimes these CRAs are used as an economic development tool to say we are positioned and prepared to try and create a great foundation for which it makes sense for your business to choose our location rather than someone else. And we do that because those businesses coming in, without those businesses, we miss out on the potential benefits that come from them, whether it be the tax revenue, the jobs that come in, all the infrastructure they put in, all sorts of things like that. Just to kind of give you a little background on how our RDA strategy works, we have focused initially on trying to bring in data centers. And that may seem a little odd because there's a lot of communities across the country that have been afraid of data centers, but Eagle Mountain's been able to find a great way to make data centers work really well for our community. And part of the reason we did that is because we understood that not only does Eagle Mountain really well suited to host data centers as companies, but also we've understood the value that comes from those data centers and what that could mean for the future of our community. Data centers themselves bring in a whole lot of tax value, but they also are very low cost to service. And then they do also provide a whole bunch of infrastructure development. These facilities are usually pretty intensive as far as what goes on inside, and so they require a whole lot of infrastructure to come in to support that. But for our strategy, the data centers is not the end goal. The data centers help set up a good foundation for Eagle Mountain to then attract other things that are going to be able to serve other purposes for Eagle Mountain. So one of the strategies you'll hear about, or you have been hearing about with Eagle Mountain, is energy. And it's not necessarily just to serve the data centers, it's because energy is really one of the big determining factors of site selection for any business type. So whether it's a factory that's building aerospace, or it's a life sciences company that's developing the latest technologies and robotics, or whatever it is, all of them need energy in some way. And so energy availability is key. And the data centers are really big on being able to help attract those. We will use the RDA in the future as a mechanism to potentially help with these other types of industries as well that will follow, looking for the energy, looking for the other things that Eagle Mountain has to provide, our workforce and things like that. So our policy and our practice has been that look at these CRAs and we negotiate the terms of them, is that the first of its kind usually gets the best arrangement to do that, because they're coming in at the highest risk. There's not necessarily a pool of existing workforce that is demonstrated to be there. They may not have all the infrastructure in play yet at that point. But after that first that comes in, everyone like it that follows would have it step down if we even offer at all. To give you a little bit of background on also what our CRA performance has been for data centers in particular, right now we have 3 projects that have CRAs that are currently actively generating revenue. The Meta Data Center campus, Tyson Foods facility, and the Ridley's grocery store area, which the school district is not part of, so that doesn't affect you. Other than you get tax revenue from it, so which is great. One of those only, as you can tell, is a data center, but we do have other CRAs that are already approved that would be future data center projects. The only other one that is currently building is Sweetwater number 3. You'll understand, you'll see that our naming conventions are very confusing, and so there's no problem if you get lost and confused on it, I understand. Sweetwater number 3 is TS, which we're talking about today, but it's their first phase, or their first campus. Data center impacts have also included a whole bunch of different things, including grants and scholarships. They helped Eagle Mountain City significantly during COVID with our businesses. They've contributed greatly to our events and so on and so forth, and the school district in particular has received a lot of help from Meta and will from others as well. The chart I brought up, wanted to just point out that even though we do have a tax increment financing arrangement with Meta, wherein a good portion of the property taxes is returned to Meta as part of their project, there is still tax generation coming to the school district. Over the past 5 years, 2021 is when that project was, the term we like to use is triggered. It's when that project first got its certificate of occupancy and started collecting taxes. Over those 5 years, the school district has received $1.7 million from Meta, and out of the 3 active projects over the past 5 years, there's been $3.7 million to the school district. We'll talk about this more as well, but each of these projects typically have caps involved, whether it's both a year cap, a duration in its length of how it can go, but also a cap on the dollars that is returned to the company or used in the project somehow. With the Meta project, this just, we pay attention to this because we want to make sure that these projects are performing as intended and hopefully actually meet their caps long before we expect them to. And that is what's happening right now with Meta. So you'll see in Meta the phases 1, 2, and 3, and these phases are per building. So if you look at an aerial view of the Meta facility, each one of those buildings is kind of shaped like an H, and so each of those H's is basically a phase. So that first phase, based on the duration of that particular building, that particular building has a 20-year lifespan, unless it meets its dollar cap. And so that dollar cap, at this point in time, we would expect it to have been up to 25%, and we're at 26% right now. And interestingly, as we get to phases 2 and 3, we're tracking much higher. So we would have expected phase 2 to be only 15% of the cap, but we're at 26% of the cap on there. So we're making good progress on that so that we hopefully never have to get to that 20-year total for each of those phases. And project-wide, we've reached 20%, which is 7.5% ahead of schedule. So we like to see that. So just want to dive in real quick into who is QTS, which is what we were talking specific about today, and what is Sweetwater number 5. So QTS is a data center company. They're a little bit different than Meta in that they're a co-location data center. What a co-location data center means is basically they create the space and then they lease out that space for the equipment of other companies to use. So they'll build those buildings, and oftentimes it'll be even nearby companies geographically. So we expect Meta to actually be even a customer of QTS. So there'll be others that come in and use that space. QTS is one of the top 10 data center in the world, and so we're not really worried about them going under or anything like that. That space will get well utilized, and in fact, the reason why we're talking about Sweetwater 5, even though they already have another CRA, is because the demand has been so high, even though they haven't even opened their first building yet. They're ready to talk about expansion, so that's good news. This map you'll see up here shows the red area is their existing project under construction right now. It's about 200 acres. That's the Sweetwater number 3 area that's been approved, and then all the blue area is the land that they have acquired for this new Sweetwater number 5 is what we're talking about now. So it's a little more over 500 acres or so. Like I said, construction's already started on Sweetwater number 3, which was great to see. They have about 3,000 workers out there at any given moment, which is just an insane number of people out there, but they're building extremely fast. Typically a data center building of that scale, about 300,000 square feet, takes around 1.5 years to be built, but these ones are building in 8 months, so about half the time normally, which is fantastic to have that done. So we're expecting the first building to open this fall. They do have power lined up. They do have options with Rocky Mountain Power, but if for whatever reason that changes, as we know, energy has been all over the place across the country. They have approvals from Eagle Mountain City to also generate their own power on site. So we don't expect any interruptions. So Sweetwater number 5, it is a new CRA representing a different reduced TIF terms in the QTS expansion. So just want to make sure it's clear that as following that policy that we mentioned before, it still applies if you're in expansion as well. So most recently we experienced this just late last year with Meta. Meta went through their expansion as well, and they had a separate CRA, and we told them it doesn't really matter if that you already have an existing agreement. We still expect you to step down quite considerably from there. So this is a different CRA with different terms. So we mentioned this. I want to mention just kind of a history real quick, just so you have some context of the different agreements we have, so you can kind of see where we have been. You can see that stepping down effect between the different data centers. I highlighted the blue. This is both of those are Meta, so you can see that difference where it was 80% of real property and 100% of personal property, and then this last go around, it was dropped down to 55% of real property and 85% of personal property, which the asterisk is a caveat to say that it was negotiated at the time to have a pretty significant reduction in the personal property for the first 5 years to help bring more money to the school district a lot sooner.
And Evan, just to clarify, the difference between real property and personal property, essentially real property is property taxes, right? The actual building versus personal property, especially for the data centers because they're having to replace the servers and everything, and they have such a short lifespan. That's why the personal property tends to be significantly higher and doesn't come down the same way the property tax portion of this will, just because there's a significant ongoing cost for them to replace all the pieces within the data center, correct?
Yeah, the personal property is quite valuable, especially in the space, but it is, for lack of a better word, volatile. It varies significantly, so they usually try and contemplate a depreciation schedule as part of that, and so they're cycling that equipment every 5 years. So you'll see as tax increment comes through every year, you'll see the values decrease, and you'll say, "Oh, that's not good. You know, we want to see those values go up," but it's expected for that to happen and then for it to shoot back up again. But that's part of what led to some of the negotiations with Meta in this last expansion, is that they wanted to preserve more preference towards the personal property, just because when you have that lower amount and the depreciation schedule, it makes it difficult for them to forecast what those costs are going to be over time. And we're seeing the same thing with QTS, although there's a little bit more nuance to that we'll explain here in a second. So we're going to go over this. I want to talk about Sweetwater number 5, just kind of the terms that we're talking about right now. And I'll say as a caveat right now, we're bringing this to you now is just kind of get you involved early and to help make sure this is a transparent process. The other taxing entities still need to be consulted as well on this as well. And so these are by no means final terms. So we're just trying to make sure that you understand where we're going with this. And also just to make it clear, because it's come up before, the RDA usually helps spearhead the conversations, negotiations with this, because it can get kind of messy if everyone do this separately. So that's where it becomes really important for us to have a really good relationship with you and a good understanding of what your policies are, what your preferences are, so that we can have those negotiations ahead of time and you're not even having to necessarily ask for these things. We're doing that hard and dirty work of making that ask for you. So we've already talked through a lot of this with them. We've already baked in a lot of things that you'll see. So right now we're negotiating at a level where we're at 45% of real property and 74% of personal property. And there's a couple things I want to point out with that. Part of it is that second bullet point. QTS has already agreed to reduce the incentive for the first 5 years, following that same pattern that was set by Meta just late last winter. So that 45% real property is actually 40% real property for those first 5 years. And when we look at all the numbers, you do still see a significant change. You'll still see a whole lot more in the first 5 years. And so that'll still be of great value to the school district. The personal property we kept fixed, and this is where the nuance comes in, yes, and why we focused on driving down the real property instead of doing anything with the personal property. With QTS, because they're a co-location data center, it's not just about the stability of the values that come from that, but it's because they pass on the personal property tax, or really at the end of the day, it's the lessees, those who are using the space, who are actually paying the personal property tax. And so because they have an existing CRA with certain terms and they're getting a new CRA with different terms, it becomes a really complicated mess for them if they're going to have different personal property entitlements between the different customers, because then you'll have customers that'll always just prefer the one property over the other. So, and in trying to be cognizant of that and trying to make sure that this project is successful for them and they're able to market their new spaces, we kept their personal property where it stands now with the current Sweetwater number 3, and then just really focused on that real property. You'll see in this chart here, we just recently got some of the numbers from our financial advisors at LRB. What we create up as part of this process is what's called a project area budget, and this project area budget just forecasts what we expect the tax revenues to be and how this increment gets moved around and things like that. So this is an actual snippet out of that project area budget, so you can see kind of how these numbers stack up and the significant values that come out of that. This project area budget assumes 4 buildings right now, but we know that the space in that 500 acres can certainly support way more than 4 buildings. So you kind of have to copy and paste based on how many buildings they ultimately end up with. But we don't necessarily have to run through all the nuances of this, but just so you kind of understand what you're looking at, that top amount is the amount that ultimately is redistributed back into the RDA and back to the company for their purposes. I'm trying to see my numbers real quick. So you'll see there's a redevelopment activities budget. There's a total amount that comes over there to the company. There's a CRA housing requirement. So the CRA, the way that is managed is ultimately the redevelopment agency takes in those dollars and pushes that out in programs like our mortgage assistance program for teachers and things like that. That 10% is a state mandate by code to have that in there. We have admin costs, and then there's ultimately that that bottom section there is the amount that still is retained and goes back to the school district every year. Something new that we're adding into this, this agreement that hasn't been there before is a declining participation provision. And this is something that's also been already agreed to by QTS. And so what we're trying to address with this is with our development agreements as a city, we typically do ask that they begin construction with a certain period of time. QTS already had in their Sweetwater number 3 development agreement that they needed to start within 3 years, which they met, and then we would be doing the same thing for this one. But what we didn't have in there is that there's nothing to encourage them to continue to develop. That because data centers can be, really subject to economic winds in some cases based on energy and all sorts of different things, we want to make sure that when they get started, they continue aggressively building so that we can realize the benefits as quickly as possible. So we created this process with a declining participation, which rewards performance of them building as quickly as possible. And basically the way it works is that there's certain milestones that they have to meet. So in the first year of a development agreement, that's basically as soon as the development agreement is signed. By year 3, they should have construction underway. Ideally, of course, they're building even before year 3, but in this case, the scenario, just to walk through this, we're going to assume they waited until the last minute to build. They would start generating tax increment at the certificate of occupancy. So we'll say it's at that end of that 3rd year that we're now getting tax increment. They have a critical 5-year period after that. So after 5 years of collecting taxes on that first building, any building that has not been completed after that set of 5 years reduces the amount of tax increment that is returned to the company and therefore retained by the school district and all the other tax entities by 5%. So as you can imagine with like that real property tax at that, let's say we're at that 45% level and they've completed 2 out of 4 buildings, the remaining 2 buildings that have not been done within that first 5 years are now down to the 40%. And then after the next 5 years, it's down to 35%. And the next 5 years, they're down to 30% and so on and so forth. There does become at some point kind of a harder stop, if you will, in that we expect that there's after 20 years, since the whole project itself has a 40-year lifespan, if you haven't started within 20 years, then you're just not going to realize the full 20-year amount out of those phasing requirements.
Evan?
Yep.
Quick question, just to confirm on 2 slides previous, where you gave us that example of the previous CRA. Next one more.
I gotta go through my. Yeah, that's the bet.
And my question is just that, obviously that was from a previous agreement and it, there we go. That one was the partnership with the Alpine School District. So just confirming that as we are working forward on this next CRA, that this is a partnership through Lake Mountain School District. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I noticed that too, that we needed to update that. And so that's LRB
All right.
probably copy and pasting from past agreements. So I appreciate you pointing that out, yep. So some other things just to note as well. The Sweetwater number 3 agreement included a requirement that for every phase, and to be clear, every phase is every building. For every phase per year, there needs to be a $25,000 contribution to the school district's foundation. So that is going to be carried over, copied and pasted over into the new agreement as well. So you'll see that accrue over time as well. And then on top of that, there will be caps set similarly to how Sweetwater number 3 had caps. So you'll never contribute any more than those numbers equate to. And then the last thing is we know that they do intend to be a major contributor to the community. They've already been meeting with us to find ways to do so. They're in our community already because they are constructing, but they are highly motivated to meet with you and understand where you feel like that there could be interface between the company and the school district. So some just next steps so you understand what happens. So we will be continuing our conversations with taxing entities, making sure that they understand where things sit and make sure everyone is comfortable moving forward. And then we will finalize the drafts, what's called the project area budget and plan documents. Those are documents that you will see and that you'll be able to review. And then from there, when we go to approval, those are approved at the RDA meetings. We provide a 30-day notice on those. You get the official draft versions of that. During that 30-day notice, that's usually when we start our process of working with the school district on creating what's called the interlocal agreement, which stipulates some of these more specific provisions. So, for example, it obviously doesn't make sense with the $25,000 that goes for the foundation. That doesn't apply to everyone. That's a school district specific provision, and so that gets captured in the interlocal agreement. So those different things we try and capture, and that's usually done with your staff just to make sure that we're all on the same page. And so then after the approval of the project area plan and budget will come to you for that approval of the interlocal agreement, which both sides must sign. And that we're anticipating is sometime in June, July, when we'd likely see that happen. So in the meantime, we will of course keep you posted if anything changes. Don't expect anything to really change at this point, just because everyone seems to be pretty happy with where things stand. But if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, or if there's any updates, we'll make sure to provide that for you. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Do you know who's subcontracted to actually do the construction?
So it's Layton Construction.
It's Layton?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. And the 3,000 workers that are involved in the construction, they plan to continue to roll them over in the different phases throughout the next, extended period?
Yeah, that's typically how it goes, is that we would expect that as soon as they're wrapping up their current buildings, they would just roll them right into the next project right after that. That was part of the reason for, using Meta as an example for why we did that one so quickly, was because they were finishing up their last buildings in the Meta campus area, and so they were ready to roll in. For them, it's Mortenson Construction moving into their next phase as quickly.
So one of the things, Evan, we've gone through the RDA process several times, and particularly as we've developed like our 15-year capital plan and we're looking at the growth, one of the things that I always tell people is it's 1,000 acres of not houses. And I think one of the things that maybe people don't understand about RDAs is that we have a little bit of a challenge in the communities that we reside in that we're not sitting on I-15, we're not on a major transportation corridor where there's just kind of a built-in commercial base. And so part of this is also to make sure that we establish a strong commercial base. And it's not going to be that, people are always like, well, when are we getting a target? When are we getting, insert whatever, right? Yep. And the argument is you have to have enough people to generate that these companies are going to come. And one of the benefits, I think, of data centers in particular is they don't have a heavy employee impact. That they usually have, a couple hundred people maybe who are working at a data center, even though they're very large facilities. And so the impact on us as a school district is significantly lower than you would have in a residential or even in a lot of other traditional RDA options, like, a Micron, a Texas Instruments thing, because there are so few employees, it has a lesser impact on us. And so one of the challenges we have to look at when we look at, the CRAs and the RDA process is what the impact will have on us as a school district, as potentially we have families move in and then we have students come in and that impacts, we have to build more schools. And so one of the things that's nice about the RDAs and the CRAs is that traditionally it is a lower impact on us on our end, that yes, it helps us financially, increases the property tax value, but then on the back end as well, it's a significantly lower impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. I'll just say real quick, is I think that's one thing that most people don't realize, to your point, is that there's a perception that the more houses that come in, you have more property tax payers. And so then that means that the city, the school district, everyone should be flush with cash and we should be able to pay for everything. Not realizing that residential really does not pay for itself. We all receive a TIF personally in our homes, basically. And we're getting to that level almost now with the property tax being stepped down for these CRAs. We're almost at that home level now. But that the homes really don't provide that tax base that we need to be able to sustain ourselves. And so these businesses are really critical, and especially when there's as a foundation for that, because they are so low of cost of service, it just is a great economic engine for bringing us a lot of those revenues that we need to supply everything. And we know that obviously Eagle Mountain needs more jobs. We want to turn traffic around. We want to get more people be able to stay in the community. We know that. We got to do certain things and trying to make sure that's a possibility. And one of those is trying to bring in infrastructure. And data centers is a great way to bring infrastructure to make it so that these other companies are wanting to come in and they don't feel like it's such a burden to do so.
I just want to thank you and the city for all the cooperation between the board and all these negotiations with all the different entities, because I know it's not a one time meeting, it's ongoing, and I appreciate you for advocating for what can work for us, the district. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Evan. We appreciate you being here and sharing the information. We have reached the end of our agenda for the study session, so we are going to adjourn until our board meeting held at 6 p.m. Thank you all.
Kofi Annan says, literacy is the bridge from misery to hope. As a former first grade teacher, I have had the privilege of watching that bridge be built in real time, one letter, one sound, one breakthrough at a time. I've seen the moment when a child realizes, I can read. And with that comes the confidence, the curiosity, and a whole new world of possibilities. I used to tell my students, you only have to read on the days you eat. Of course, they giggled because they knew that meant they had to read every day. But that simple phrase carried a powerful truth. Literacy isn't optional, it's essential. It fuels everything we do. I am excited about the opportunity to create a district of excellence where literacy is the foundation for every student. When we commit to strong reading skills early, we set the stage for success in every subject for every future path. I believe in this work because I've lived it, and together we can ensure that every child in every classroom builds that bridge and crosses it with confidence.
Thank you, Board Member Lincoln. Appreciate that. Next up on the agenda, we have community comments, and we don't have any community comments, so we are going to move right along to the consent agenda. In your packet, there were the meeting minutes from March, as well as the expenditure report, and then personnel hiring. Is there a motion about the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Lincoln and a second by Board Member Judkins. Do we have any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda with a motion by Board Member Lincoln and a second by Board Member Judkins, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that appears to pass unanimously. Next up, we have several discussion action items. Our first one is regarding the Rush Creek property. I am actually going to request that we move this to next meeting's agenda. We have had some options come up, some additional information that we need to review more specifically, so we're going to ask that this be moved to the next agenda and that we address it at that time.
Do you want a motion to table then, or?
Yeah, do we have a motion to table this to the next meeting?
I move to table the Rush Creek contract.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Lincoln. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Isaacson. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of tabling the Rush Creek contract and shifting it to next month's board, or next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that appears to pass unanimously. Next up, we have Policy 704, Media and Public Relations. This is the second reading. Board Member Lincoln.
So this policy, we heard back in, I believe it was the end of January, and then the committee, the policy committee has also reviewed it. Some of the changes were in some definitions, updating what the district's standard definition list is. We're going to try to make sure that definitions are consistent, one policy to the next. We made some changes in the scope, making sure that we protect board members' ability to communicate with the public and media. That's part of our job, and to be accountable is that ability to communicate with media. And then defining exactly what media is in the policy, really strengthening that definition. Making sure that news media is clearly defined what it is, and hopefully we've kind of nailed that down better. So any questions on this policy?
Yeah, we're still so new to this process that since the last time that we met and read this, I see that you've made amendments that reflect some of that feedback that we gave in the last meeting. However, unless you want to kill me, I have some
Nope, I
additional
love
feedback.
the collaboration.
And part of this feedback is going to be just more generic, right? Like in the process as we create the policies. Can I give an example? Okay, in definition, under board, it's written as the board Board, the Lake Mountain Board of Education, the elected governing body of the district responsible for establishing policy, setting direction, and providing oversight. For both brevity and clarity, going forward, I generally think we should limit the definitions to just the strict what is, whatever it is we're defining, rather than what it is and what it does. For example, this could read the Lake Mountain Board of Education, the elected governing body of the district, period. No
Okay.
more. Right? That's similar to feedback then with the superintendent, which designates the allowance for a designee performing the actions as assigned, but then the last sentence we could drop. For example, the superintendent retains accountability for designated actions. I think that probably falls under some of the definitions and governance under some of the 200 series, and I know you're changing some of the policy series, the serialized numbering system or whatever you use. So I think that's some global feedback that it will help the policies in general stay a little more concise.
Okay.
Is that okay? And
Yeah.
Do you think we agree?
No, I think in these first policies, I really want to make sure we get them right and we get the process
Yeah.
really fine-tuned instead of passing stuff just because it's before us. I want that process, because what we're doing now is going to set how we develop all of the policy. And so making sure that foundation is really solid is important. So making sure that we focus in on those definitions and fine tune them, I think is important.
Okay, in that vein, then I have a couple more.
Keep going.
All right. Thank you for being so understanding. And I agree. I think we get these first few, and we get a rhythm for how we approach these. In scope and under the initial policy statement paragraph, I think it's a question of scope as well, a little bit. The second sentence says the use of public resources, essentially saying, our responsibility for communication to the public, yes. However, in a manner that is accurate, lawful, and consistent with board policy, I think we're always trying to act in a lawful manner with ethics and serving the public. Like, phrases like that are true, but just tend to pop up in a few places. And I think we can, again, be a little more brief. Okay. And under policy provision, go ahead.
So do you have a recommendation there?
I just strike.
So the entire part that was
Nope.
in, just one more time, what were you
Yeah,
saying?
so after district operations and use of public resources, I think we strike in a manner that is accurate, lawful, and consistent with board policy, because I think it's implied that our policies are intending to outline the way in which we work ethically and within the scope of our policies.
Thank you.
Yeah. And in policy provisions, and this is where I think you guys did a great job on taking the feedback from the last meeting, because I don't have hardly any notes, except for in section 1. Section 1, board and superintendent roles is really covered in the governance policies that we were working on. And I know that's still in some rounds of feedback and refinement. But I wonder if we strike that whole section 1.
Yeah.
Again, because of the
So-
overlap in policy.
Just make sure I'm understanding. It sounds like the importance is making sure that our words are brief and concise, and we're not using additional words when not needed if they're covered elsewhere. So in eliminating that cross-contamination, cross-contamination is probably the wrong word, but where different policies are saying aspects of another policy, I think that's going to be really important that as we do these beginning ones, that we watch for that, because when we have nothing to build on, we're like, oh yeah, we should put that there so it's clear, but really it belongs in a different policy.
I think you articulated that really well.
Can I question that for one thing?
Yeah.
I see what you're saying about the redundancy piece. However, the section 1 does relate to communication in a way, which is that media piece. So I wonder if for some things where it does directly relate to the policy, that it might not hurt to have a little bit of redundancy,
Yeah, I mean, I think if it
but
overlaps.
maybe clarified.
Sure, like if it overlaps in particular with the policy at hand. For example, in this case, it's communication. Well, in section 2, we actually outline what the superintendent's role is in managing the communication. And so I don't think we need to then talk about the superintendent's role in section 1, which is specifically outlining the board's role in the communication representing the district. Now, could we refine section 1? For example, I don't think you need section 1.1, but 1.2, 1.3 could be combined to simply say that the board represents the board, right? The superintendent doesn't represent the board, although they do as well, right? Like they represent the district, including as part of an officer. So yeah, I think you could strike 1.1 and take 1.2, 1.3 and simply say that the board retains its ability to represent itself and communicate to the public on our behalf. In particular, and this is kind of a separate note, but I had it here in the same section. I don't know if we need to, but we could outline that the board leadership would be the standard, the board president would be the standard representative to communicate to the public about representing the voice of the board. And again, I'm still learning on this too, so.
No, I think we can, I think, and again, it comes to that as we start doing policies, we don't have an additional work of policies that we're referring back to, where potentially parts really belong living in a different policy. And so being cognizant of that as we build policy, I think is important.
Yeah, being a new board member has been an interesting process because you do have to learn so much. And so as I learn to understand how to read policy, to improve my skill in reading and writing policy, that's something that I'm taking it kind of as a third party coming in with fresh eyes and realizing that the more brief and concise we can be, the more friendly it is to our community and our staff who don't work with policy every day as they click in to read about cell phones and what's our rule about cell phones in schools. If it's brief and concise this way, without all the overlap, it's easier for them to digest and understand.
And I think that's important at this phase. We're developing our policy voice and how that's going to feel across all of our policies. So really, again, I appreciate the collaboration and taking time to get that right now so that as we build that voice, it will kind of snowball and it'll be, I want to say like holistic. It won't feel piecemealed.
Sure. Yep.
So a thought I had is, having worked in Alpine School District, and I would go look up policy, we as a school board are worried about all those policies and all that language, but being a person who just went and looked up one policy, I just looked up one policy. I didn't go read all of them. So there's a part of me that feels like we should clarify in each policy because maybe our teachers or our parents or our students are only reading that one and they're not going to go see this other definition over in another policy.
That's fair. I think your definition section has some comprehension to it, right? Like every maybe unfamiliar term or unfamiliar concept is defined well within the definition section. At first reading, I look at the definitions and think, do you have to define board or superintendent or designee or some of these things every time? But I think the answer to your point is yes. Go ahead and make the definition section brief, but as comprehensive as possible so that it allows for independent comprehension.
And that was one thing like I struggled with is do we have a policy of definitions where like they're all there? But then going back to Eileen's point of people don't cross-reference. When you have a concern and you go look for a policy, you want the answer right there and you want it fully, you don't want to have to chase 100 different places. Although our policies, we link to all of the connecting pieces, making sure that they're concise and people can find the information they need in one spot is important.
Yeah.
So Joylyn, I'm wondering if this covers, I'm just kind of thinking through the ways in which, as board members, we communicate. Like, for example, going and testifying in a legislative committee, and sometimes you may get quoted when you're not necessarily there, like, on official board business, but maybe the ledge committee has decided that, like, we're going to oppose this policy, and somebody goes and they testify, and maybe there hasn't been an official board vote, but the legislative committee has said, yeah, we're opposed to this policy because of whatever. And then the other thing I'm thinking of, and this has happened to me before, where you write something on social media and then somebody grabs that quote and puts it in a news article without your knowledge or permission. And then now you're quoted and it looks like an official board position when it's not. It was just you communicating on social media. So I'm just wondering, as we're looking at some of these about, I get that maybe that's not, like, for example, I have previously said if I'm going to vote no in a meeting, I'm going to explain why. And so it could be that, it was a 6-1 vote and so the official board action is, we approved X, but I voted no. And so I'm going to go explain why I voted no. And that's technically not the board position, but I feel a need to do that with constituents. So I'm just wondering, is there space for that to happen?
And this is one where it's housing in two different policies. Like board responsibility, like if you're on a committee or you're in leadership or as a board member, there are certain times you're going to speak on things, and that's not clarified here. It just says authorized by the board. But if you've been assigned by a board to a committee, then you're authorized in that scope. But that would house in that board responsibility policy. And so that's a space where that overlap gets to be a little tricky. Do you define that overlap here or define it in the other policy? Because as board members, and that's why up at the very beginning, it was really important to say that nothing here prohibits a board member from speaking in their elected capacity. And so that's when I've struggled with is, do you put it here? Do you put it there? Do you cross-reference it? And we say, let's keep them brief and separate, but then sometimes they do need to live together. And I think as a committee, we'll keep sorting that out as we find that policy voice. But I appreciate that perspective and making sure that as board members, we can communicate. And that's why it just says as authorized by a board. But if you've been assigned a committee or assigned a leadership position, then that's an authorization. We don't have to say in a board meeting and take a vote, I vote that Julie can go testify at the legislative committee, because that's already covered in the committee assignments and in her responsibility, and it says leadership. So, I don't know, sometimes I almost think like we should write the whole policy book and then pass it all at once, so then you can see how they line up, but that's a long time to go without feedback why that policy book is developed.
Okay, so I guess my question is, are we just doing discussion? Am I entertaining a motion? Where are we sitting on this?
It sounds like it's a motion to send it back to the policy committee to continue to work on that voice. And if you noticed on the cover sheet, I put that as a possibility. And I think that taking the time to do that is really important. And I really want to reiterate that over and over, that getting the policy tone and voice correct in the beginning is important. And it can't be just done in isolation with just one person or just even a small committee. It needs the whole board to weigh in on it, and that's why it comes before us. And then kicking it back, it's part of the process. It's not a flaw, and it's not it wasn't done correctly. It's part of the living process of policy development.
And just to add, as we're starting to meet as a policy committee and starting to review stuff, the comments you made, Matt, are valid, because as I was looking across things, that's some of the comments I had in terms like every time we define the board, it needs to be the same in every policy. Because that was something I was seeing too, and that was a comment that I made. We're starting that process, so we need that consistency piece. So with that being said, is it okay if I make a motion for this to move to table? Okay. I move that the board table the policy 704, media and public relations, and bring back the recommendations, revise it back to the committee.
Second.
I kind of want to.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Saucer and a second by Board Member Isaacson. Any discussion? Oh,
Did you motion to table or motion to send back to committee?
What did I say?
You said to table and to move back to committee.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
we're good. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion by Board Member Saucer and a second by Board Member Isaacson that we table policy 704, media and public relations, send it back to committee. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that appears to pass unanimously. Okay, so this next one is a little bit interesting because we're talking about truth and taxation, but it's actually an Alpine issue. So I just want to kind of try to review this a little bit, and I'm going to try and condense everything in a really small amount of time because everything is really complicated when it comes to the certified tax rate. Essentially, what happens is that the county assessor will assess everybody's house every year and say, this is how much your house is worth. And if your assessed value goes up, which has happened a lot, then what happens is the certified tax rate sinks down. And it's set up so that whatever money was received by a taxing entity last year is the same amount they receive the next year. So when an assessed value goes up, it automatically pushes the rate down to make that number the same. It's a little bit complicated for school districts for a couple of reasons, and there's also an exclusion of growth, okay? It's a little bit complicated for school districts because we used to have what was called a 5-year hold harmless, which essentially meant when that rate keeps sinking down, there's a state requirement that, like a floor that we're required to hit on our end. And we basically got a 5-year waiver. It's like, okay, it's okay if you sink below the floor. And if you sink below the floor, you essentially don't get state matching money. And it gets to be significant. I want to say in Alpine, it's over $5 million a year or something. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember what the exact number is, but it's something like that. So it's a significant amount of money if you let the rate sink. So last year, legislation was passed that said, just kidding, you have a 1-year hold harmless, which all of a sudden got a little scary because then it's like, okay, if we were off, now we've got to reset really fast. Legislation was passed again this year because we like to change things up just to make sure everyone's paying attention. That said that just kidding, now it's a 2-year hold harmless. So it gives us a little bit more room. I anticipate that the rate is going to drop again this year because houses are going to be assessed at a higher rate. Alpine needs to consider whether or not they're going to raise that, what are referred to as increments, to hold the rate steady so we're not doing like a seesaw thing. One of the reasons that we need to talk about this is because the way code is written, our certified tax rate, whatever Alpine does this year, is locked in for 2027. So when we become a school district next year on July 1 of 2027, we cannot change the tax rate. So if houses go up this year and the certified tax rate drops, and then they go up next year and the certified tax rate drops again, we are in significant trouble with potentially now being in that 2-year hold harmless area. And one of the things that Alpine has done is that they've chosen to, okay, we'll go up an increment or two to hold the rate steady, but we're not going to do like 17 increments, so that it's like, it's these small little things that just kind of keep the rate here once again, and it doesn't fluctuate up and down. Alpine is willing to consider going through truth and taxation, but because of code changes, that decision made in May. They are not willing to consider truth and taxation unless all 3 new boards say that they are supportive of Alpine going through truth and taxation. So as a school board, we can write a letter, and the letter would simply say, the Lake Mountain School District Board of Education is supportive of the Alpine School District Board of Education pursuing truth and taxation. That's all we need to say. It's a 1-sentence letter. As to what the recommendation is from staff, that will vary based on what comes back with the assessed value and how much it will significantly impact the district. I tried to make that as simple as I could. Don't ask me hard questions, but you can ask me questions.
So if we send a letter saying that we approve, are we basically giving Alpine School District to look through the process, see what you said, but then come to a vote where they will raise taxes?
It means that they can pursue truth in taxation. It doesn't mean that they will choose to raise taxes.
Okay.
They have 7 board, but they can't even ask the question unless we say, will you ask the question? So part of this is it just leaves an option open. And there have been times in the past where taxing entities have said, hey, we're considering up to 5 increments, and then they end up going for 2 or for 3. The thing that gets a little complicated is we don't find out from the county what the tax rate is until, is it like June 20th? I think it's June 20th in code. But the way that the code is written with truth in taxation, Alpine has to declare it in May that they're considering it. So they kind of have to declare it before they even know what the tax impact is. And this is where it gets a little bit wonky, because if there's a significant change in assessed value this year and next, it will mean that we are forced to raise taxes in 2028 because we have fallen below the required increment level and we're now outside of the 2-year hold harmless. And it could be that it's, oh, we have to raise six increments in a year or something, depending on how much it goes. And we're not directing Alpine to do it. We're just saying, we'd like you to pursue it. And then they can ask the questions, staff can make the recommendations, they can, and it's a whole process where they also have to declare what the money's being used for. The vote doesn't actually happen until August. So it's not a quick decision. It's something that's processed over several months.
So would they come back to us and say, okay, now we've looked at everything and we're gonna go ask for three increments?
No,
Would they come back to us and say, is that approval for you?
no.
No, okay. So basically, we're just saying whether or not they can look into it.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you remind me, Alpine raises the taxes if they choose to, or goes through truth in taxation in 2026. Who goes through truth in taxation in 2027?
No one.
No one, okay.
I shouldn't say no one. I mean, cities, water districts, UFA,
But
whoever.
there's-
But the new districts, Timpanogos, Lake Mountain, and Aspen Peaks are not allowed to pursue truth in taxation in 27, which would technically be fiscal year 28. They're not allowed to pursue it.
And Alpine isn't allowed to that year either.
And Alpine is not, because they will not be a taxing entity. So whatever rate is decided this year, based on what Alpine does, will be the rate that we live with next year. And depending on if there is a higher assessed property tax, and then the rate drops, we will potentially deal with the repercussions of that the following year. Sorry, certified tax rate, all of this is really, really complicated. It usually takes people 3 years to figure it out. And so I'm trying to explain it. And it's yeah, okay.
I'd like you to explain why we have the truth in taxation laws we do.
I will give you the email addresses of your legislators, and you can contact them since they are the ones who write the code. But thank you, Board Member Isaacson, for that question.
So,
I feel like you were setting me up for something.
Wield that new gavel of yours judiciously, please, and don't hit me with it.
so then it's safe to say that we're very grateful for the change in legislation this year that gave the 2-year hold harmless as opposed to just the 1-year hold harmless.
Yes, because if the 1 year had been in effect, it would have been problematic potentially for us next year.
Yeah. I think the reality is we had such a meteoric rise of property values across the county that there's a limited amount of, the county assessor can only raise your taxable value of your home, of your property, X% per year. And so even if the rates in the last 12 months or the next 12 months don't go up a ton, there's such a backlog of increments that happen in valuations that the assessors essentially has a decade worth of increases in queue. So this is just kind of the reality that we're faced based on the economies from the last 5 years.
So I just want to clarify, so I think the same question that Eileen asked, but just so basically if we were to send this letter, it's just entertaining the opportunity for Alpine to consider it.
Yes.
Okay.
We're not saying we want you to go for 2.3 increments because we don't have that information. And so Alpine will have to consider that based on the conversations they have with the county, with the assessor's office, with the information that's given to them. And it may be that they choose to, once again, say, you know, we're going to go up to 4, but then they only end up doing 2 because you have to say and you have to post publicly, and there's all these rules associated with it. One of the rules that is actually now different this year is you have to have a meeting in May that is only a meeting about truth and taxation. It can't be a board meeting. It can't be a study session. Literally, all you can do is go in and have a conversation about truth and taxation. The laws have changed every year, but they've tightened up significantly over the last year. And if you were aware, last year, the majority of people of taxing entities who went through taxation did not have it honored because they're very, very tight now about making sure every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and if you miss a comma somewhere, it's a no. So a lot of school districts, a lot of cities, taxing entities actually went through the entire truth and taxation process, and then were told at the very end, you didn't do it correctly. And then a lot of them have had to alter their budgets significantly because they thought they had approved a tax increase, and then it was denied by the state tax commission.
So are you asking for a vote to a letter, or is this a discussion? And then I guess the next piece is, if Alpine is having these discussions, at any point, does our board or the other boards affected need to vote on this, or is this solely an Alpine decision?
So the actual tax increments, because Alpine is the taxing entity and we don't have any taxing authority, Alpine will be the one to actually vote on the taxes. They're just asking for support from the 3 boards. The staff will not recommend truth and taxation to be considered unless there's support from all 3 boards. So once again, I don't think we get into the weeds about increments and numbers. We literally just say, as a board, we are supportive of Alpine School District pursuing truth and taxation, and that's it. That's what I'm going to propose the letter actually says that comes from us, and that's it. So I guess I'll actually make the motion,
Hold on.
except you want to talk.
I do
Go
wanna
for
talk.
it.
It's my turn. I pushed the button even. I just want to reinforce really what Matt said so that we're really clearly hearing this, that understanding that it is not if the home values are going to increase, regardless of what happens in the market, they will. That's a given. So now it is a matter of we have to make decisions based on the likelihood being nearly 100% that they're going to increase in that, and then how that's going to impact us. So I just reducing that down super, super simply, that it's not an if, it's going to be increased, and it's going to impact us. It's a big deal.
Yes. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make the motion. I'm going to move that we approve a letter as previously stated, that we as a Lake Mountain School Board are supportive of Alpine School District pursuing truth and taxation. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member King and a second by Board Member Lincoln. Do we have any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that appears to pass unanimously. Next up, we have Superintendent and Board Report. Superintendent Carter, we would love to hear from you. We're very excited.
Can you guys pick this up for me? Okay, I have about 3 different items. I'm saving the best for last that you asked me to do just now. So first of all, we're super excited about the hiring we've been able to do. Just this week, we announced our Director of Special Education here, Jacqueline Knapp. She came from Park City. We're super excited. We announced the Director of Business Operations. That's Carol Guest. She came out of business. She actually is also paralegal, which we're pretty excited about that as well. And we announced the principal of the Horizon School because Dan Heaps is moving to open the new school in the Timpanogos district, and that's Gary Robinson. So we feel like that was 3 stellar announcements. If you go on our website, you'll see pictures of Jacqueline and Carol, but not Gary because he's still part of Alpine with the schools. So we also have hired a CTE, a director of CTE and a director of teaching and learning 7 through 12. They have both accepted, but they won't be announced until Wednesday. So I must keep that one silent. In addition, we are posting on Friday principals for 2 middle schools because we have 2 vacancies that were made with all the shifts in all districts. We are posting Lake Mountain Middle School and Vista Heights Middle School. We have depleted our eligible to hire list, and so that is open to anyone who wants to apply. And I hope everyone online just heard me say that so that they, because I'm getting a lot of questions about that. So if you want to apply, anyone is welcome to apply with obviously the appropriate credentials. We are also posting 2 technology support managers, a technology support manager and a technology engineer manager. And then we are posting an assistant SPED director. And that's it for hiring. That's all good news. We also had a really productive meeting with the city today. I was able to meet with the mayor and 2 councilmen, meet them, and Julie was there, and the city manager. And I was just floored by the support they have for Lake Mountain School District. It was just so good to see a lot of the things that we've been working really hard to have happen, which I'm sure people are going to talk about. They were so supportive of what we want to do at the transportation center, the county land for facilities, the Walker property, and our interchange with St. John properties. So I was just so appreciative of their willingness to help us and the obvious show of support that they had for us this morning. And then finally, I'm gonna do the logo. This was presented, all of the principals in Saratoga Springs were at a breakfast meeting this morning with the city, and Matt presented this, so now we're gonna show you guys. So this is a possible sticker that we might be passing out at farmers markets and summer events or at employee celebrations. This one had to be here so you didn't see the logo before you're supposed to. So now we're gonna show you the logo. So this logo is built on the idea of we want to make waves and move mountains. It's very simple, it's very clean. You can put it on a shirt, you can put it on a hat, you can put it on letterhead, and let me give you more ideas. So, wait. Okay, I might be missing one. So this shows, it's next. The colors? Okay, thanks. Okay, so this shows the idea of the waves and the idea of fluid creativity. So on that top one on the right, it's highlighting the wave, and we're talking about the fluidity of creativity and things like that. We want things to flow. We want things to be awesome, and we want to make waves. And then the bottom one on the right shows the mountains, and that stands for accountability, which we had a presentation on accountability today, and the rigid laws of math and science when you look at mountains. So we do have colors, fonts, all of those things. I'm only going to show you one more. Oh. Okay, right there. Obviously, this is Matt's presentation, but I was honored to be able to share it with you guys. So these are the colors we have. It's maybe hard to see on the TV, but there's dark blue. It's called lake blue. And we have a cream color, and then we have the white. So we have variations. If you are lucky enough to receive an email from me, I have one of these on my signature because I'm really happy about that we're finally here. And we are doing a soft rollout. We're not going to throw a party or anything, but I would welcome you to add this to your signature on your email. We'll get letterhead designed, we'll get badges designed, and we're going to move forward, and we're very excited. Thank you. Okay, it is now time
I just forgot to turn on my mic. It is now time for board member reports, if board members would like to share information.
I think the silence is we're all working so diligently and hard in so many different areas that we don't know where to start or stop in our communication of reports. But I'm very excited for this team and the hard work that everybody is doing.
I can't remember if it was work session or board meeting a couple of meetings ago, we saw a presentation about the potential to build a permanent home for the ATEC West program, which needs a new name and will need to be part of the process. But the post-secondary transition special needs school, the proposal was to see if it would fit and how viable it was to live right on the Thunder Ridge Elementary as well as the Horizon property. And it is a viable plan, but we have had another opportunity come down the line that we're currently exploring. And so there's more information coming there, but I know people have been asking since we presented that. And so I want to just publicly announce that there's another site that we're looking at. And if that goes well, we'll have two really good options to choose from for a permanent home for the ATEC kids.
Okay, I'll go. I wanted to, I know that Vicki alluded to this, the hiring that we've been doing. It's been intense. And I just want to especially thank Vicki and Amanda. They have been spending an insane amount of time, as well as other members of our cabinet team, interviewing people, making sure we get the right fit. I'm thrilled that we have Jacqueline here today. So super stoked to work with her. I feel like I need to write apology letters to some of the other districts. I'm like, I'm sorry we stole your best people, but kind of not. Just so excited about the team that's coming together, the energy, the enthusiasm, the idea created. But it's also like an insanely time-consuming process of doing paper screenings and the interviews and trying to find the right fit, the right balance, and I'm just incredibly grateful for the team effort. It's also been really fascinating. I think a lot of times there's a little bit of I don't want to say secrecy, but like, oh, how is this all done? One of the things that I've always really appreciated about Dr. Carter is that she's highly collaborative. She always makes sure that she's a team of people that are participating in interviews. There's always a discussion. It's always this balance of finding, once again, like the right people. And I think that that's part of the magic of what's happened, is that as we've added new people onto the team, it's like, okay, it's been interesting having discussions with new employees where they've been like, okay, so like, how many people can I hire? And we're like, well, how many people do you want to hire? And we're just having a conversation about how do you want to develop your team? What supports do you How do we make this the most successful thing possible? How do we get resources to schools? How do we keep it light at the district level while also making sure the appropriate supports are in place for our administrators, for our teachers, so that they can be successful? And so just the synergy associated with it is just really impressive. And I know a huge piece of this is because Dr. Carter is so highly collaborative. So I'm just incredibly grateful for that. And I want to make sure that I thank Vicki and Amanda as well as the cabinet for finding the right people and being committed to that. It's time consuming, but so worth it. I'm thrilled with the hires that we've had. We really are just taking the cream of the crop. And I'm so excited for the opportunities that we have coming our way. One of the things that happens is I tell people all the time that 90% of the things that we do as a board are not in public. And that sounds a little bit bad, but meaning that like it's not in a public meeting where like even it's the relationship building that we were doing today with the city of Saratoga Springs with our principals, that a lot of things that we're doing are happening behind the scenes, whether it's working with developers or partnerships, finding the right contracts, the right people to be in place. We're going to start moving very fast. There have been a lot of things behind the scenes that are in process. I suspect that in the next 3 to 4 months, the pace is going to go very, very quickly. With the amount of things that we start and get initiated, we have multiple, I mean, Matt referenced this, but we have multiple concept plans that are being developed for at least 4 different projects. And so I think sometimes it feels like, well, there wasn't a ton of stuff on the agenda, or what's not happening. Believe me, there's a ton of work being done. A lot of times it takes, 200 hours before we can get to a place where we can vote. Or as we keep sending Joylyn back and saying, can you write the policy again? Just know that we are committed to getting it right. And sometimes that means it's going to go a little bit slower in the beginning, and then it's going to go really, really fast once all those things get locked in. And so I just want to express my gratitude, like I said, to the staff, our cabinet, Eileen heading up the branding committee. It goes slow and then it goes fast, and then now we have a great logo and a brand. And I'm just incredibly appreciative of everyone who's participated and how they've helped, because I could not be prouder to be in this district. And I want to thank you guys all for all your contributions for that. Okay, so I don't see anybody else wanting to talk. I'm going to just pause here awkwardly for another second or two to see if anything lights up. Okay, so do we have a motion to, we don't have need of closed session. I should say that from the beginning. Sorry, we don't have need of closed session. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second.
So we have a motion by Board Member Strong and a second by Board Member Judkins. All in favor of adjourning our meeting, please say aye. Aye. Okay, and we are adjourned at 6:47. Thank you all for being here.